Yo, welcome back to the Yo Elliott Show, where we're about making men great again. And today I got a guest who's all about making men great through a myriad of red pill philosophies. I got Rollo Tomassi here. He's the author of the Rational Male book series, which I've really been enjoying the last couple weeks here. He's also the author of his blog, therationalmale.com. Rollo, thank you for joining us, brother.
Thanks for having me. And also, thank you. I wanted to thank you personally for coming on the Red Man group the other time. Yeah, the last time you was on, that was really good.
I had a great time, man. I really like what you guys are doing, and I'm glad to be in cahoots, making men great again. I really love it. Hey, so I'm loving your books, bro. I've been through the first two. I can't wait to get the third one. There are 3 books titled The Rational Male. Maybe you can tell us what your definition of a rational male is. What's a rational male?
Well, I think a rational male is a guy who is informed, first and foremost. When I wrote the first book, it was a collection of a lot of the posts that I had put together on my blog. And a lot of people don't know that a lot of those posts were from about 8 to 10 years of forum interaction on a forum called SoSuave. And I was a moderator on SoSuave for a very long time. And the guys there said, hey, you know, you should really get into reading some of this stuff about like some of these blogs like Roosh V or Royce. It was Royce back then, because remember back before 2009, I think it was 2005 or something like that. And so I started reading up on these guys, and I always liked the forum side of things. I liked the interaction between, 2 guys or 3 guys or 10 guys, whatever. We're all sharing our information. So a lot of the stuff that I was writing about in the very early stages came from these conversations that I had on SoSuave. I happened to also be double majoring at the time in fine art, and then also in behavioral psychology. And one of the reasons I decided to double major was because I was starting to do sort of peer counseling as part of my university experience, because that was part of what I had to do. And I focused mainly on men's issues, which nobody was really doing at that time. And so I'm talking to guys who are anywhere between, like, say, their late 20s all the way up into their 50s. And just sort of understanding the commonalities, the problems that these guys are having. And then I was relating that to the conversations that I was having on SoSuave. Now, SoSuave originally started out as sort of this pickup artist community, where these guys were coming together and sort of, comparing notes as to how can we, how to get with a girl more, more efficiently, really.
Right.
Some guys wanted to do it just to get a girlfriend. Some guys wanted to do it because they just wanted to spin plates. They wanted to be non-exclusive. And so was this aggregate, for the first time, I think, that guys could come together and share their experiences from all over the world. And that was what made it really great for me. And so a lot of the posts that I ended up coming up with, the posts are the blog has been around since 2011. So I just came up on the 7th year anniversary just this month. And like I said, probably the first 2 or 3 years were all based on these conversations. Now, I was very resistant in the beginning because I liked that interplay between men talking about, what we were going to do. And I didn't want to come off like a know-it-all, or I didn't want to come off like I was, like I'm some sort of authority or something like that. But everybody kept encouraging me, says, your stuff is just amazing. You're going to have to do a blog. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to do a blog. I'll put out what, I'll see how it goes. And
that was therationalmale.com.
That was the very first incarnation of the Rational Male. And lo and behold, I kind of became sort of a luminary, I guess, in what would become the manosphere, because it wasn't even called the manosphere back then. And it was myself, Roosh V, and Royce. So we were the 3 R's of the manosphere, Roosh, Rollo, and Royce. And Royce ended up, he has Heartiste, which is another kind of, I think probably one of the biggest manosphere blogs as far as red pill is concerned. But he got doxxed back in 2009, and things kind of changed for him. And I'm not really sure it's him who's doing it now. Roosh has gone through a series of changes himself. I don't get too deep into that, but things changed up. And then, but I've been doing this for a while. And then I had, if you read the introduction to the first book, I had a whole bunch of people asking me to compile all these things into a book because they wanted to give this information to their friends.
And the things you were compiling was about the rational side of your nature. I think it's interesting that you are a double major and that your other major was art, correct?
Yes.
That's that ain't too rational.
Yeah, yeah.
We
Well,
have the
can
Dolly Museum here in St. Petersburg, and
yeah.
that's completely irrational.
I have been to it actually. I used to live in Orlando for I was the art director for a very I'm not going to say the name, but a very high profile importer exporter of wine and spirits for a very long time. And so that was my main job while I was doing all this stuff, you know, aside. And this is really has always been a labor of love for me. I never set out to be an author. I just kind of fell into becoming an author. And as a matter of fact, people complain about the first book. They say, well, the first book it's crammed full of stuff, but the font's so small, and you know it's 300 pages, and I'm like, you know, now I have to go and re-edit it. But at the time, the reason for that is because I thought it was going to be the only thing I ever wrote in my life. So if this is the book that I'm writing for my lifetime, I want to get everything that I can possibly get into this. Right. And so
you wrote it for these guys in the forum. I would yes. imagine that there's some irrationality going on here in order for you to step in and say, rational male, this is what it's about.
I ended up naming the blog The Rational Male. Originally, not necessarily because I thought that, you know, guys need this, you know, need to be more rational or anything like that. I wrote it because if you, I think a lot of guys don't really understand that intersexual dynamics follows a logical path. Okay?
Right.
You've already read probably the second book, I'm sure, of Preventive Medicine. In there, I lay out a timeline, and in actually all of my blog posts and in all of my books, I make comparisons to what guys are seeing, and you know, a lot of guys tell me they say I always knew this stuff, but I could never articulate it. And I think that what I've done is I've articulated this, and I think we have ridiculed men for a very, very long time. I mean, we have made men into being, you know, these ridiculous figures like you know, Homer Simpson or Everybody Loves Raymond, or that kind of stereotype for fathers in particular. But
why do you think the media does that? What's with that? Why does the media portray us either to be villains or bumbling fools?
Well, because ever since the sexual revolution, there has been a kind of a quantum shift over from the empowering men to empowering women. And I don't think a lot of people really realize this, but at the time of the sexual revolution, you know, we gave women almost unilateral control over what I call hypergamy. And we did so by giving them hormonal birth control. So we said, here you go, ladies, you take care of all the birthing. You decide, you know, what you're going to do with all this. And we're just going to enjoy having sex with you. And little by little, from I'd say about the mid 60s all the way up to where we are right now, we have seen this progressive disempowerment of men. And we've done so not by actually taking things away from them so much as we have in changing the character of masculinity. We've made masculinity either something that is very, very ridiculous, or we've made it into something that is dangerous, or we've turned it into something that men just simply don't understand anymore. Like, it's been deliberately blurred and obscured. So guys don't know, even today, like I read a lot of blogs, and I see a lot of, you know, I'm always listening from what I call a red pill lens or red pill perspective. So I'm listening to these guys talk about stuff. And what happens is I'm constantly hearing at least 3 different stories. One is men are ridiculous. The other is toxic masculinity, and men are dangerous, and if we don't do something about it, they're going to kill everybody, and kids are going to shoot up schools, and, you know, husbands are going to kill wives. And then there's the guys who just simply don't understand masculinity. They're just like, I can't be a man. I don't understand what masculinity is. Right. There are these. This is more of like the millennial confusion about what I call conventional masculinity. And what I mean by I never use the word traditional. People always say, well, why don't you just call it traditional masculinity? Well, because everybody has different traditions. My traditions are different from your traditions, which are different from somebody who's in a whole different country, and, you know, China or India, wherever. They have different traditions. But the aspects and qualities that have defined masculinity and masculine men for, you know, ever since time began, there are commonalities, and that's why I call those.
What are those? I'd
Well,
like to know,
there's
what are the
strength,
commonalities?
there's strength, there's decisiveness. There are the biological traits. I mean, anything
Right.
that comes from, say, testosterone. And I know that a lot of women will say, well, I'm masculine, or I have all these traits too. Well, you have them. If that's true, then you have masculine traits. There are feminine traits and there are masculine traits.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of exactly what I was talking to you about here is there's this blurring of the line. There's this confusion. And if we can confuse men about masculinity, then we can make masculinity whatever the hell we want it to be. And that's, you want to know why I wanted to be rational about things, is sort of break these things down. That's the main point. It's applying, it is the result of myself applying what I know from aggregating all this information, what I know about psychology, what I know about Evo Psych, about Evo Bio, behavioral psychology, all of this, and sort of fitting those pieces together as rationally as I possibly could. So when I first started writing, I started learning from guys who were like pickup artists, and they would say, "Oh, I'm using these techniques. I'm using amuse mastery. I'm using cocky funny. I'm sure you probably heard of all these. I'm using peacocking. And so I was listening to all this, and I go, why does that work? And I've always been the guy that you know, I never cared so much that the car ran, but I wanted to look at under the hood, and I wanted to pick it apart and then be able to put it back together again. It was never enough for me to know that you could just turn on the TV and the TV worked. I was the kid that would always rip the TV apart, look how and then try to put it back together again.
Break it down.
And that's kind of like, and that's how I've actually, you might find this funny, is that that's actually how I apply myself to art. And that's how I apply myself to psychology as well, is I like to pick things apart and I like to put things back together again. And so I was reading up on, like, say, Mystery Method or some of these guys from the old school pickup artistry. And I go, why does that work? Why does that technique work with women? And for a long time, I was very much blue pill myself. And I would think, you know, you got to be nice to the girl. You got to do all this stuff that most blue pill guys, you know, go through.
What does that mean? I mean, you're using the term red pill and blue pill, and you're talking about blue pill right now and saying being a nice guy.
Yeah.
We're all taught to be nice guys. What does that mean?
Well, the way that I define red pill and blue pill is, you have to go back to when I was at SOSWAP, because there was nobody called it red pill and nobody called it blue pill. I think a lot of what is called red pill right now is sort of a bastardization of what we used to call it, or the terminology we used to use. Whenever I say things like alpha or beta or blue pill or red pill, all of those are abstract terms. Okay, I don't mean those in sense that, like, you know, like alpha. I don't think we're like silverback gorillas, or we're, you know, wolves, or on the, you know, the plains or something like that. I use those as abstracts or placeholder terms for an idea. Okay, that's really what words are.
And in your book, you did a wonderful job. You gave an example of a young man who exhibit alpha by his ability to stand by his decision and not apologize, and to do so
without being aware that he's doing it. Like, it's just who he is naturally. And people take me to task on it. His name is Corey Worthington, and the guy has since sort of like screwed himself up. But back at the time, the guy was what I call the alpha Buddha, meaning like he was in an alpha state that was very, very zen. Like, he didn't realize he was so alpha, he didn't realize he was being alpha, because that's just, he was, you know, he was embodying that. And but anyway, but getting back to the point here is the red pill is, we used to call these guys who didn't know anything about intersexual dynamics, we used to say that they were plugged into the matrix, because there was all this stuff that we learned when we were kids. From the time we were 5 years old, we've been acculturated and socialized. And
Disney movies.
Learn on Disney movies, on, you know, be nice to the girl, you know, put her on a pedestal. You know, we always tell guys, you know, to take the woman off the pedestal. Where does the pedestal start? It starts when they're 5 years old. Okay, you know, carry her books home, never hit a girl, respect your mother, respect women, just out of, you know, because of no other reason than they're just a woman, right?
And so you're saying this doesn't work? Well,
I'm saying that what we are taught, there's a reason for what we are taught. So what I call the blue pill is what we get from society. It's what I call the village. Okay, the village can be media, it can be your school teachers, it can be your family, it can be the church, it can be the television set, it can be popular culture, it can be music. Music lyrics is a really good one. Whatever is sort of foisting that narrative and trying to mold, in this case, young men. I kind of get into it with women as well, but like for men, they are basically taught this bill of goods to be what I call to adhere to an old social contract that nobody's really using anymore. And I think guys, as they wake up to that and they cut themselves away from that old blue pill training, that's what I say. You have unplugged from the matrix, and you are become red pill. You're red pill aware.
Now, are we red pill by nature?
I think that no. Well, I would say no. I would say that we are red pilled by understanding and by coming into alignment with how things really are, and breaking yourself away from the way that you've been taught.
Yeah.
To what you're learning, about the nuts and bolts and mechanics. Like I say, you tear it apart and put it back together again.
In society,
that's red pill awareness. Okay, it can be societal, it can be personal, it can be between men and women, which is what I focus on primarily. But it doesn't have to be just that. Okay,
it's
it can be how you deal with your
as
mom
as I've been looking through your things and studying these ideas and looking at myself and looking at the men in my life. My dad grew up in Belize in the jungle, no training whatsoever, didn't go to school, didn't wear shoes, climbed trees. And my dad is alpha as
very much so. Yep.
And it's interesting because, he comes to this country, he marries a woman, and he still retained his alphaness. And me growing up in society where blue pill conditioning is everywhere, it's ever present, it's omnipresent. I didn't understand my dad for a long time. And
you probably disliked him for that.
I disliked my dad, but now that I've, maybe the past 5 years or so, as I'm coming into my own understanding and as I'm reading things from you and these guys in the manuscript, I'm realizing that my dad is the ultimate alpha simply because, maybe DNA, I'm sure, has a lot to do with it, but a lot of it because he was not conditioned out of his natural state.
And I get that a lot. I get a lot of guys who hit me up from, like, say, Brazil, or they're from a Latin country, and they'll say, here we still treat men like they're men. And you know what? For the large part, they're probably right about that. But as Western society gets spread through Europe and through other countries right now, it's just a matter of time before. And feminism is it's just a symptom of a larger disease, I think. And it's trying to convince men that they don't need to be alpha, that they don't need the kind of qualities like, say, your father has, right? So that's why I said you probably disliked him, because you grew up in a social order that made you question those things. It made you say, why does he have to be why does he have to be Superman all the time? Why can't he just, open up and talk about his emotions and be more feminine and be more what would we say, to get in touch with his feminine side? Well, he's not going to do that because he's from the old school, because he's from a social order where the conventional masculinity was expected of him. And so as these generations pass away, we get further and further away from that conventional masculinity that your father had, and probably your grandfather had as well, because he probably would have expected that.
My grandfather wrestled bulls.
Yeah. I was going to say, I would expect something like that, but yeah, and you're right. Really, it's a process of acculturation. It's a process, at least in the blue pill part of it. You know how they say it takes a village to raise a child.
Right.
Okay, if you read the third book, I explain this a little bit. And so whenever I refer to the village, I mean all of the influences that act in concert to turn a guy from a natural red pill guy into a blue pill guy who's going to, grow up on Disney fairy tales and believe that women should be empowered, and or believe in egalitarian equalism. We all need to be, there is no difference between men and women. I mean, this is the biggest lie I think that's being perpetrated right now on Western culture, is that
there's no difference between men and women.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty dangerous.
I mean, you look at a guy like James Damore, who's the kid that was at Google, and just for suggesting that men and women might be different. I mean, here's the evidence to prove so. And the more we get into understanding the architecture of our brains, men's brains versus women's brains, our psychology and our innate mental firmware that we're evolved to have as men or as women, obviously men have more testosterone. That is going to, change our fundamental outlook on things. We're going to be more aggressive. We're going to be more assertive. We're going to be more, we're just going to be, the physical aspects of that. Those, the physical effects of testosterone are certainly masculinizing effects. So we can certainly call whatever testosterone does to a human body, those are conventionally masculine aspects. But we take all of that and we look at these differences. But I think right now, I'm probably going to end up having to write a book about this at some point too, but because I use this enough. But I talk about egalitarian equalism, blank slate equalism. And what I mean by that is this persistent idea that men and women are exactly the same. And even the people who will tell you men and women, yeah, we're different, but we're more alike than we are. No, we're actually a whole lot more different than a lot of people want to give credit for. And there's
in your books, you talk about how men and women love differently, and you even go on to say something that I've heard many times from many men, that a woman can't love a man the way a man wants to be loved.
Wants to be, yes.
What's the difference between a way a man loves and a way a woman loves?
Okay. This was a really tough, next to alpha, this is probably the most controversial idea that I've thrown out there. The reason I say that is because men tend to love idealistically. They think in terms of what's out there, what can be. If you're familiar with any of the work of Steven Pinker, he has a lot of what we were talking about before, the differences, the actual evolved differences between men and women. Men tend to be more concerned with things. Women tend to be more concerned with people, okay? It's just the choices that they make, brain architecture. Women have a higher facility for, higher faculty, I should say, for communications. They understand body language. They understand sub-communications. They understand vocal intonation, expressions and stuff. Men tend to be more analytical. We have more spatial. Our gifts are spatial gifts, where we can throw a ball accurately. Coming out of the womb, you don't have to teach a boy to throw like a boy. You have to teach a girl to throw like a boy, but you don't have to teach a boy to throw like a boy, because that's just part of what we evolved for. Okay, and so if you look at the things that men are concerned with, they approach love from an idealistic sort of a possibility of what could be, okay? Women, on the other hand, approach love from an opportunistic point. And a lot of women call me the carpet for this because I use the term opportunistic. But the reason I say that women's concept of love is opportunistic is because they love from the perspective of hypergamy, okay? A woman is not going to allow herself to fall in love with a guy who is not in some way meeting her hypergamous needs. That might be based on faulty information, but the point being is that women are always going to look for the bigger and the better deal. They always want the guy who is stronger, smarter, funnier, more affluent, has more status. They're always looking for something that's, I always say that hypergamy doesn't seek its own level. It's always seeking for a better deal. And why is that? Well, because it improves the human race. It keeps us, hopefully the next generation is better than the one before.
So women are looking for men that will bring them up in status, or
that too, but also they want to ensure survivability for themselves. They want to ensure survivability for their offspring. Okay, so
Now, don't men do the same thing?
They do, but men do not have an attraction floor. They don't have the same, like a man. Have you ever heard the saying, nobody's ugly after 2 a.m.? Yeah, that's the thing, is guys don't have the attraction floor that women do. First of all, women won't allow themselves to fall in love with a guy who they feel is beneath their sexual market value. Men, on the other hand, our sexual impulse, our biological imperative is to spread seed. Okay, it's to get with as many women as we possibly can, and then maybe
women are more picky than men.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, and that's what hypergamy means?
Hypergamy is women looking for the bigger and the better deal, always looking for something that is above where they are, as far as they believe they are, I should say, in sexual market value. So when I say that men love idealistically and women love opportunistically, they're coming at it from two different aspects. So a guy thinks the woman also loves idealistically, because why? He's been brought up to think, Disney dreams come true. And that, I hear this a lot. Guys say, I just want to get with a woman who loves me as much as I love her.
Right.
Okay. Well, he's approaching that I love her from an idealistic perspective. Whereas a woman might say the same thing. She says, I want a guy who loves me as much as I love him. But she's approaching love from an opportunistic perspective.
And so how does a woman show her love? Because, we're thinking in terms of what I receive, but there's always a give and take. How does a woman show her love to a man?
Well,
how does a man say that this woman is showing me her love the way that a woman can show love?
first and foremost, it's sexual. Okay, men see sex as an affirmation of them doing something right. Okay, that they have measured up. Okay, because a lot of the game that we talk about, a lot of hypergamy, is men displaying and women choosing. Okay, so if a woman chooses that guy, how does she say, I choose you? Well, she has sex with that guy, first of all, because that's the ultimate expression of, here's how I love you, here's why I want to be with you. But also understand that sex is also, women apply sex from two different sides, okay? One of those sides is validational, which is the woman who falls in love with a guy who's alpha male, and she's really hot for that guy and she wants to have his babies, okay? And then there's the woman who sees sex as transactional. And I'm saying that can exist both within the same woman, okay? So you have a transactional sex, it's what can this guy do for me? If I have sex with him, X amount of times, then he's going to bring home X amount of dollars. We're going to have a family together because he has his shit together and he is, he's a high value guy from a long-term perspective. So one thing you have to always understand about hypergamy is it's based on two things. It's based on, and I don't know if I can swear here, so I'm not going to. It's alpha seed and beta need.
Hey,
okay?
Be an alpha and say whatever the fuck you want to say.
Okay. The alpha fucks and beta bucks is what it comes out to.
Yeah.
But anyway, and the reason I said that is I just went on Pat Campbell's show and it's almost slipped. Anyways, so alpha fucks and beta bucks, and usually this happens at different stages during a woman's menstrual cycle, but also at different stages during her life. So there's the short term and there's the long term. But alpha fucks is basically short term sexual need. It's sexual breeding, and it's all about getting the seed. Okay, it's all about the sexy. I don't know if you're familiar with sexy sons theory, but it's getting the guy who is the highest caliber genetic material she can get. Then the beta buck side of hypergamy is defined by how well a guy can provide for her long-term security and provide for the security of any offspring she may have, whether that's with him or with another guy that she had before. Now, hypergamy, to be optimized, would mean that we'd have to put both of those aspects in the same guy. He'd have to be the guy that she really wants to fuck, and he'd have to be the guy that she really wants to start a family with. That's ideal. But for the most part, and because of the way we've changed society right now, those two aspects rarely exist in the same guy right now. Yeah. So you've got the guys who are, like, say, the 20, and this is being generous, the 20% of guys who are alpha versus the 80% of guys who are beta. Those beta guys might be better selections when it comes to long-term security, whereas the alpha guy, the 20% of the alpha guys, are better for breeding with, and therefore you see more women becoming single mothers, and they'll have kids with 42% of marriage, or 42% of kids are born out of wedlock today. And you have to ask, you want to know what let's get back to the rational question. Why is that? Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the stuff that's been going on with female empowerment and making sure that the beta buck side of hypergamy is already taken care of. Well, if we can do that through state programs, or if we can do that through resource transfers from men to women, whether directly or indirectly, indirectly being taxes and stuff, directly being child support payments and things like that. If you can go and you can satisfy that already, what's left? Alpha fucks. So women will mm-hmm. default more to the alpha fuck side of things, which is why you see a lot of guys, instead of trying to build themselves up socially or job-wise. I'm saying that's not important, but you see guys applying themselves more to the physical right now because men will adapt to whatever it is that they believe that women are seeking or requiring of them at any one time. So
back to the question though, but beyond sex, because if a woman loves mm-hmm. you, she'll show you through sex is mm-hmm. the first one. What are other ways that a man can assess whether or not this woman really loves me? So if a man loves a woman, you're saying that it's idealistic, and I get it. We put them on pedestals and we become the hero and the provider and the protector. What does a woman do, or how does a man assess whether or not this woman really loves me?
Well, the next one after that, after sex, is I would say submitting to a man's frame. Okay, there's frame is a real big deal in my books, and it's a real big deal, I really think, in the red pill community and the master.
Yeah.
In general, heck, we could talk for an hour about frame alone, but
well, it'd be good, because what is a man with a frame?
Mm-hmm. Well, man, okay, when I talk about frame is actually not something I made up. It's actually a sociological term, psychological term. And what that means is, like, say for instance, this is the easiest way to understand frame is if you work a 9-to-5 job, or you work for somebody, you have a supervisor, you have a boss, okay?
Mm-hmm.
For the 8 hours that you are working on your job for whoever it is that you're working for, you're working within the frame of that boss or that supervisor or that company. So your time is not your own, it is somebody else's who is paying for it, but you are operating in your basic understanding of everything that you do for those 8 hours, and, you know, until you're off on the weekends, is you're basing your decisions, you're basing you're living within the world and within the confines, the social confines of the guy who runs.
You're submitting to his frame.
You're submitting to his frame. The same holds true for personal relationships. It could be family. When you're a kid, you have no other choice but to be in your dad or your mom's frame, okay? Because you depend on them for your survival. Now, when you get into between a man and a woman, that is when there is a lot of struggle, okay? So if woman is really in love with you, like I think when I was talking to Rich Cooper once, he was saying, how do you vet a woman? How do you vet her for marriage, or how do you know that she loves you? One way, I think, is that she trusts you with her life. Now, I threw it out there as an example, is that when you get into a car with your wife, does she drive the car, or do you drive the car? I use this as an example, is when I met my wife, she was the first woman who, when we would go out on a date and she was, we were taking her car, she would hand me the keys to the car and she says, "You drive," because she expected me to be the driver. For you
to hold the frame.
She expected me to hold the frame. And she was the first woman to ever do that, because I mean, I dated a lot of women before her, but whenever I went out with them, I was always sitting in the passenger seat, like a little kid. She didn't want me there. She wanted me to be driving at all times. And that has set the frame for my entire marriage for the last 22 years. I'm expected to drive. I'm expected to make the decision. She is acquiescing, surrendering her authority to my authority. Okay. So what I say goes. When we moved to Orlando, Florida, I said, we're moving to Orlando because my company is moving us there. It wasn't like, oh, I got friends here, or I got a career here. It was like, when are we going?
This is what we're doing.
This is what we're doing.
You're either with me or you're not.
So submitting to a man's frame and doing so out of genuine desire. And I think that needs to be discussed more than anything else. Is
how does a man
want to know how a woman loves a man is she shows a genuine organic desire for that man, to be with that man, to whether it's sex or whether it's being with him or living with him or raising his kids or wanting to be with that guy all the time. It is a genuine, honest to goodness desire. It's not an obligation. It is not something that she's been trained to do. It is something that she really feels that she has to do, because that is,
that's how she loves. That's how she shows
that big a deal. Yes, it's through genuine desire. And that might be a good segue into the concept of genuine desire, because that is a biggie. For
genuine desire versus, I think you called it like fabricated desire.
Obligated. Well, one of my biggest quotes is, "You cannot negotiate genuine desire." And what I mean by that is, and I came up with this when I told you before, I was doing peer counseling, and I'd meet all these guys and they would say they're splitting up with their wives. There'd be 55, 60-year-old guys, and they're crying in my lap saying, I can't get her. I would do anything she says. How can I get her to love me? And just blubbering because they just can't figure it out, because they think that their lives and their wives and their relationship is dependent on what he's doing, like how much he can provide. I got to buy her a new toy. I got to do this. They're constantly trying to figure it out.
Trying to negotiate.
They've already lost the frame, first of all. But second of all, their wives have no desire to be with them. They have no genuine desire. Maybe in the beginning they did. Right. And I talk to a lot of guys who say, "Oh, Rollo, help me out. I've lost the frame. How do I get the frame back?" Generally, it's not an issue of trust. It's an issue of desire. And that's where I think a lot of marriage counselors get it wrong.
So how do you naturally have a woman desire you? How do you naturally
you can? Well, there's a few things that you can do. First of all, is to be yourself. Be your natural alpha self, and to maintain an identity that is always going to be separate from your wives. The key to a healthy relationship is always going to be polarity. You are going to be you, and she's going to be her.
Mm-hmm.
And if she has a genuine desire for who you are, when you are, where you're at, if she genuinely wants that, that's a genuine desire. And a lot of guys only experience this before they get married. They will be like in their 20s or something, they're dating, and the woman cannot wait to get with them. She'll break, we say this, women will break rules for alphas, and they will make more rules for betas. Okay? And so what happens is that if a woman genuinely wants to be with you, she's going to find a way to be with you. She's going to find a way to fuck you. She's going to find a way to jump through whatever hoops, or crawl under barbed wire to get to you, because that is the strength of her desire. I always tell guys, you want the hell yeah woman. You want the woman who says, hey, you want to go on a date? Hell yeah, I want to go on a date. Do you want to go rock climbing or something? Hell yeah, I want to go rock, because she's that excited and has that kind of genuine desire for you. And I don't think a lot of women even really get to experience that genuine desire, because a lot of it becomes mitigated. It becomes mitigated by their need to have security. That need to, once they get to, say, 29 to 31 years old, which is what I call the epiphany phase, they need something that they can't get just from the alpha guy. They need to look forward, look for some long-term security. And so what they do is they mitigate, or they compromise genuine desire. And that's why I tell guys, is like, when guys are saying, I would do anything if she would just love me again, or I would do anything to get back to where we were before. What they're trying to do is they're trying to negotiate. They're saying, if I do if I do X amount of chores around the house, if I wash the dishes, if I do a load of laundry, if I take, put diapers on the kid, that kind of stuff, then she'll fuck me more. In fact, we have a term for that called chore play, right? Where women say, if you would just help out around the house, I'd be more horny. No, you're not going to be more horny, but that is a negotiation of genuine desire. So that once the guy does all that and says, hey, I did all these chores, it's time to have sex, she's still not going to want him, because she just has no genuine desire. And in fact, she's going to be more resentful, because now she feels obligated to do so, because she said she would, and she negotiated it.
And I guess he lost the frame, because in that situation, she'd be the one holding the frame. And that
still has the frame, because
the polarity is messed up.
Because because he is qualifying to her rather than she qualifying to him. Women want a guy that other men want to be and other women want to fuck. And if you're not that guy in your marriage, you're going to have troubles. Okay. It's going to be, there needs to be a healthy polarity right there.
So you've been married for 22 years.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. So a lot of the guys listening, and a lot of guys you write for, are guys that are learning about being with women. What do men who are in long-term relationships or married need to know about this red pill awareness and things of that nature?
I have I don't know if you've read the third book. In the third book, I have a series of 4 chapters in there that's called the Reconstruction. And what you're describing right now, we call awakened while married. Okay, so these guys are very much blue pill. They went through the process of getting married. Maybe they're having troubles. Most of these guys are guys who end up in what we call dead bedrooms, and they want to figure out, a way to get back into that old sexual nature that they got from their wives before. And so what I tell these guys is, say, first of all, you've lost the frame. She's the one that's dictating the terms to you in your own relationship. There's no polarity, because you have become who you wanted, or who you thought that she wanted you to be. And so you have jumped through all of the hoops that she told you to. You've done all the chores she asked you to do. You've become the person that she has said that she wanted you to be, but she still doesn't want to fuck the guy that she said that she wanted to. And guys can't figure that out. So what I tell them is, once they start reading my books and they become more red pill aware, and they understand intersexual dynamics, and they understand the innate nature of women's psychological states, what I tell them to is, I say, you need to break up with your wife. You need to break up with your wife. And I'm not saying that in the formal sense. I'm saying in your head, you need to break up with your wife. Because if you're not making the changes in your life for yourself, and you're doing it just for that woman, then it's not going to be genuine, and she's going to pick up on that. Because women can pick up on communications a whole lot better than men can. And so if you're just doing something, and you're just making changes in your life just to get her to come around and have sex with you, well, what's going to happen? As soon as she comes around and starts having sex with you, you're going to go back to being the way that you were before, because you had no real interest in yourself, as opposed to wanting to do it for someone else. So you have to break up with that person. And once you've broken up with that woman in your head, You have to decide, I'm going to go forward. I'm going to make myself a better person. I'm going to start getting into the gym. I'm going to start working on different things. I'm going to change.
Build a frame.
I'm going to reclaim my own identity. People say, oh, you're going to grab your balls back. Yeah, well, you're going to grab your balls back, but you're also going to grab your old identity back, or you're going to create a new identity for yourself. And in some cases, that identity might not be compatible with the woman that you married 30 years ago. And so the next question I ask these guys, I said, once you have decided that you're going to make changes for yourself and nobody else, then you have to ask yourself that once you started making these changes and you've improved yourself a little bit more, is the person that you're married to, is she somebody that you are compatible? Are you even compatible with? Because you've changed yourself into somebody different, and you're not doing it for her. Now here she comes back around. Is this somebody that is really worthwhile and worth your time? A lot of guys will say yes. They'll say absolutely. If they had too much of a separation, if there was too much distance between them, they might say, you know what, I'm just going to divorce her. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try something new.
So you can get the desire back by redeveloping your frame.
By redeveloping your frame, redeveloping your frame. But first off, you have to make that all about you. And the reason, and this is a primary part of what I write about, is I have that's in the second book, I think it's called Mental Point of Origin. And I think one of the biggest crimes that we commit on men and boys right now is, from a very early age, we teach them to not think of themselves first. Remember, we were talking about Corey Worthington a little while ago, with the alpha male guy who was like sort of a Zen alpha. Like he just didn't even realize. This is a guy who's untrained, like maybe like your dad, okay? He just has this natural alpha, it's never been cut back. It's never been molded. It's never been erased from him. But I think that in Western cultures today, we try to erase that. And one way we do that is we tell boys, you need to think of other people first. You need to think of women first. You need to respect women just because they're women and not because they've married. Like for anybody else, for any other guy, we would only respect that guy because he has done something that's worthy of our respect, because he's married to that. That's another difference between men and women. Women tend to be more collectivist, men tend to be more merit-based. And so what these guys do is, consequently, from the time they're, let's say, 5 years old, all the way up until they're like in their early or late 20s to early 30s, they haven't put themselves as their mental focuses. And what I mean by mental point of origin is, you have to put, like, whenever a decision is put in front of you, your first thought is, how does this affect me? What am I going to do with this information? What are the decisions that I make? How are they going to affect my life? And then you go and you say, okay, how is that going to affect other people? And right now, I think most guys will go, I have this, I've got this job, and it's, they're asking me to move to Orlando. How's that going to affect my wife, right? That's the first thing. That's their mental point of origin, is not themselves. It is their wife, or it is their family, or it is, because a really strong sense of family can do the same thing. Religion can do the same thing.
Well, don't men want to do that? Like, isn't it kind of in our nature also too, to sacrifice,
to serve, exactly, to serve, to protect,
I can tell you that it's a kind of a slippery slope there also too, because I've spent the first part of my, the past few years, I've got a 13-year-old daughter. So since we started having children, working to serve my family and provide for my family, I put them first. Absolutely. 100%. And one of the big goals was to have a home where I've got 4 children and each child can have their own home. And it wasn't until I actually achieved that goal, and this isn't the first time I've achieved goals. And when I get there, I realize I'm not satisfied, because this is not what I wanted. I did it for them. So how do we balance this out where we can serve, but at the same time put ourselves first?
Yes, and that's what I always say. That's why I always encourage mental point of origin, is to place yourself. I tell guys, you go through, most of your lifetime learning how to serve other people, or to think of other people before yourself. I think we also tend to think of guys who are really super successful as being like psychopathic, right? They only think about themselves. They don't think about anybody else. Well, yeah, you know why? Because they did that. That's why they're successful, and that's why they're at where they are, because that's what's necessary in this day and age, is to be on borderline psychopathic. But we only call them psychopathic because they don't fit in with what we've been taught from a very early age. And that message is to take yourself off your mental point of origin, put somebody else there. Now, how do you get around that? Well, just what you were saying before, I'm a very big proponent on what's called enlightened self-interest, okay? What that means is I can't help anyone else until I can help myself, okay? Or I can't help people as well as if I have already helped myself.
Mm-hmm.
So if I build myself up into the best person that I can be, then I can say, okay, I can use what I have. I can use the excess resources that I've created. I can use the excess talent and the skills and everything else. It's all benefiting me. Now that person is worthy of it. And that person, that woman over there, she'd be all right if I married her and we had kids together. And you're better in a better position to make those decisions to help other people if you help yourself in the beginning. And so it's like when you are, the easiest way to explain this is like when you're on a plane and they tell you when the oxygen masks drop down, what do they tell you to do first? Put the thing on yourself and then help the person. Because if you don't, you asphyxiate and you die before you can help somebody else, because you have to take care of you first and then you can take care of other people. And that's kind of a rudimentary way of thinking about enlightened self-interest. So learning mental point of origin is really tough for guys, because they kind of develop a sense of pride around it. They just sense men have a natural affinity for honor. And so when you wrap that up, when honor can be used against you, and
Right.
that case, or honor, duty, loyalty, that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I really feel that those are not genetic, but certainly evolved aspects of masculine nature, because we want to be useful, because we want to have a purpose, because
Right.
we're natural deductive problem solvers. And so as a result of that, that can be used against us. So
Sure.
if a woman says, well, it's your duty to do this for me, or, whatever, and you have been brought up to think of others and to make sure that like we say, happy wife, happy life,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff where you're abdicating the authority, the natural authority that you should have, because you worked your ass up for it. You merited it, and the integrity and the respect and everything else that you have, it should be appreciated, rather than having somebody say, well, it's your duty to do this for me. No, it's not my duty to do goddamn thing for you. It's I'm going to
That's
do
huge.
made
Appreciation.
on my own thing. Yes.
Appreciation is huge in my book. And my wife has known this since I was a football player. I was a captain of the football team and she was a cheerleader. And none of that has ever ended. She's still cheering me on. And I voiced this to her, but I think she also understood it and she does a great job of it. And that's why we've been together for so long.
She has a genuine desire for you.
Well, yeah, but part of what keeps me genuinely desiring to serve her is this appreciation that pours out. She's constantly thank you. I appreciate you. You're doing a great job. This is something that I think a lot of women don't serve their men with. And I see it happening with a lot of the guys I know, where their women are more chastising them rather than, you said that we put women up on a pedestal, but in a way, we as men kind of want to be put on the pedestal so that we know that our sacrifice is worthy by saying thank you.
There's I don't know when the last time you saw Saving Private Ryan was, but in the end of that movie where Private Ryan is sort of over the grave of, I forget the name of the guy, Sergeant Miller, I think it was whoever Tom Hanks was playing. He asks the woman, his wife, am I a good person? Did I earn this? Did I merit? Because he wants to know that he earned because the guy sacrificed his life for his, right? And so at the end of that movie, if you look at the differences between the end of that movie and say the end of say Titanic, where the woman is like, her heart is, she might have got married and had another marriage with another guy, but her heart was always with Jack, who went to the bottom of the ocean, right? So she's what we call an alpha widow, and her appreciation is not necessarily for her husband; it's for the guy that she left those years ago, who died and is at the bottom of the sea, right? Because it's so romantic, blah blah blah. Whereas for men, it's a different dynamic where you're exactly right. It's like we want that appreciation, we want that recognition. It's not necessarily out of vanity or ego satisfaction. It's this want to know that we've done the best we could. What we could do. And you are 100% right on how this is a very rare quality in women today. In fact, I have a post, and it's in the first book too. It's called Appreciation. And I think today it is almost impossible for women to really have an appreciation for guys, because they are taught, again, to ridicule masculinity, to question it, to think it is toxic, to find fault in it is in as many ways as you possibly can. And then the stuff that you're doing, the stuff that you feel like you're, especially if you're an old social contract kind of guy where you're this provider and you're doing this stuff and you think that that's what defines you as a man, women just take that for granted because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be putting food on the table. You're supposed to be loyal to your wife. You're supposed to, you're supposed to resist temptation. You're supposed to do all this stuff. You're supposed to do your best, right? And so women just take that as for granted. And at the same time, when women have a tough time struggling with appreciation, they also constantly get this narrative of men ain't shit and they're borderline rapists all the time, and that's you have Me Too, and so it's this suspicion and it's this polarization between the sexes where if you're a strong independent woman, what that makes you is autonomous. It will make you self-sufficient, self-satisfying. You're just this thing. You're not a woman, you're not a man, you're just this thing, right? And you cannot have the other half of that complementary side of things when you're in a marriage if you are self-sufficient. Why would you need to be married? You see how that,
or dependent on the state.
Or dependent on the state. But you also you will see women marrying themselves. I've seen these stories where women go and they're like, I'm going to marry myself because the guy's not coming around, and I'm going to prove to myself, because they really just want the wedding experience. But you don't see men marrying themselves. You see women marrying themselves. Why? Because they've been fed this line of the strong, independent woman who can do anything for herself. Well, what happens is if she don't need no man, then no man's going to come around and need her. And I believe that men and women evolve to be complementary to each other. We're not equals. Right. We are meant to be complements to
we know our role and play our parts. And that's been severely confused.
And that is biologically true as well as psychologically true. And I think that we've done a great disservice for young men today because we have been training them to be more feminine. You and we were talking about before about how's masculinity changed. Well,
they've been taught that what an alpha male is, all those traits, those aggressive traits are bad. So you either be beta or you be a bad guy. I really love this term that you use in your book, and you got a whole book. The third book is titled Positive Masculinity. When I hear that, I get goosebumps because it just reminds me of like Zeus energy, this strong, powerful, but loving and nurturing positive masculinity. Tell me a little bit more about what that means.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because when I was titling that book, I had always thought I was going to use positive masculinity because that was like the working title, and I just went along with it. But I was running the title by some friends of mine in the manosphere, and they said, no, you shouldn't call it positive masculinity. You should just call it masculinity. And I'm like, why is that? And because my thinking is that masculinity today has been so corrupted and so debased right now that we don't think of it in terms of positivity. Right after that shooting that happened in Las Vegas, I started to notice a shift in the narrative. And what I mean by that is there's always been toxic masculinity. Okay, the feminists and the feminine imperative have always been trying to qualify masculinity. So anything that was good to them, they didn't really talk about. But any aspect of masculinity that was either inconvenient or completely contradictory to a feminine correct narrative, that was always what was described of as being toxically masculine. So violence, toxically masculine. All of these propensities for aggression. Okay, why? Well, because we've got testosterone in us. Now we think of those in negative aspects all the time because we're taught to think of them, to qualify masculinity as here's good masculinity and here's bad masculinity, and but we don't even talk about good masculinity because the qualities that they say are good masculinity is just a man acting more feminine,
like a woman, right?
Yes, and so we're all about we say, toxic masculinity, men take more risks and they're violent. And it's like, and that's fine until you need somebody to protect you. And that's fine until you need somebody to lift you up out of the floodwaters in Texas to lift you to safety. Okay. That's, it's toxic right up until the point where you actually need those qualities. And so when I titled the book Positive Masculinity, I was trying to it was to me, it seemed kind of revolutionary at the time. I don't, maybe not revolutionary is the word I'm looking for, but certainly kind of shocking or going against the grain, because nobody thinks of masculinity in positive terms anymore. And I always say that there is no such thing as toxic masculinity, but there's only the aspects of masculinity that are convenient to the feminine imperative, and there's the aspects that are not. And so my attempt to do with that book was to put a new spin on it, on masculinity, and get guys to think about things in a different respect. And that's one of the reasons why I started with the family and raising boys, and well, raising daughters as well, but like being a red pill parent in the very beginning of that book, because I think that is where it needs to start.
Right.
And I'll tell you, man, the response that I got to that, for trying to say, gentlemen, if you're a red pill guy, be a red pill father, teach your kids, be a mentor. Even if you're not a father, be a mentor and teach, men, or teach young men to, the truths about intersexual dynamics, teach them to be red pill aware, give them a red pill.
What about daughters? How does a red pill father teach his daughters?
I'm glad you asked. I have a 20-year-old daughter.
And I have 3 of them.
Yeah. I think that the best thing that you can do for a daughter is to live out your role as a red pill man.
Yep.
I did not realize this until my daughter started dating seriously. She's in her actually junior year in college right now. Just started, but right until her senior year of high school and her freshman and sophomore year of college, I couldn't appreciate this until she started dating. And I saw that the guys that she was going out with, she was making natural distinctions between guys who were beta and guys who were alpha, and guys who were like dad and guys who weren't like dad. And I'm proud to say that the guy that she's with right now, I will be proud to call him my son-in-law right now, because the guy is very much like me, very alpha. I think as a guy, you're a father to a daughter. So I think that from the respect of it's always on the back of my mind. I know the long-term consequences of a relationship. I don't think men and women really think about those, and we don't think about family. We always think about ourselves. It's always this selfish, what is best for me? What's not what's best for my family, or what's my future family? So parents kind of have to look out for that. And people will think this is controversial, but I think that back in the day when we had arranged marriages and men were honest and were genuinely interested in the well-being of their daughter or their son, and forging alliances and putting families together and having that understanding, in some ways I do see the wisdom in that. But I think that when you're raising a daughter, the primary thing that guys need to do is that women, or not women in general, but kids don't listen to what you say, they watch what you do.
Yeah.
And they look at you as that role. People always say, "Oh, it's a role model. It's a role model." Yeah, well, you are the masculine role model, and that's one of the worst things I think we do right now is we expect women to be both masculine role model and feminine role model, and to give them this hubris of believing that they can be the best of both, and they cannot be the best of that masculine role, because they have never lived a masculine life. They've never been in a masculine existence. But to say, "Oh, my single mom was great, I didn't need no dad," all you're doing for those kids is you're buying them into that strong independent woman narrative that we were talking about before. But when you have a masculine father and you have a feminine mother, that child is learning 2 different gender intelligences, I guess, or learning how those roles are, what a man should be and what a woman should be. Now, hopefully the guy is a good alpha, red pill aware guy who's has his shit going for him, and his wife is like, say, your wife or my wife, where they're very supportive, they're within the frame of that man, and they realize this, and that's what they naturally start looking. They don't know why they're looking for that guy, but that's what they look for in the guy. And then I think that if you do a good job as a red pill aware parent, and you instill the differences between men and women, and you are living out your like my wife and I have been together for 22 years, and my daughter to this day says, "You guys are not like anything like any of my friends' parents are at all. If they're even still together."
Right.
And I'm very proud of that. You kind of get a little bit of twinge of pride right there. But but it's true, because so many people end up in these really fucked up relationships, and they certainly don't appreciate that. They can't see that. But my daughter's an only child, so she sees us all the time. She's our best. She's one of our friends. We bring her around. I mean, she's still our daughter, but she's a friend. She hangs out with us. Her and my wife are very, very, very tight. We're very tight. And that is a good example or a good model of what I hope she strives for, is hope she gets out of life in a marriage later on. But right now, it's like I said, you can't tell the kid what to do, but you can model for them what they should do. And then they pick up on that and they go, okay, this guy's a lot like dad. I'm more
What do you think about sex before marriage?
I think it's inevitable, to be honest. I'm realistic about that. I have my own, religious beliefs, but I think that that it's more realistic to assume that you're going to have sex before marriage and you aren't going to. If that is your conviction, I don't hold that against anybody. In fact, I've just, as a red pill guy coming into red pill awareness, I understand why it's important to reserve oneself for marriage. I don't think it's practical, but I do understand the wisdom of it, because when a girl has sex for the first time with a guy, that woman tends to imprint on that guy, because then what we were talking about before, we were talking about alpha widows. That guy, you never forget your first kind of thing. That guy's going to set the benchmark for any other guy that comes past that. And from that, like the studies show that if a woman has the more sexual partners that a woman has, the less likely it is that she can form healthy attachment bonds to a man later on. So if a woman has been with, like, say, 2 or 3 guys, that's one thing. If a woman's been like 10 or 12 guys, that woman might have trouble imprinting. And the reason for this is that if you've got 3 guys and then you've got 10 guys, within that set of 10 guys, how many of those guys are actually going to be alpha enough to outdo the guy that was right before them? Okay. And so it's always this escalation. It's like, who was guys think of that it's a numbers game. And I think that if a woman has sex with, like, say, 3 guys, but one of those guys was really super alpha, and then you come along and you weren't nearly as alpha as that guy was before, it's not going to matter if she had 3 guys or 10 guys. She's still imprinted with that one alpha guy. Now, when women get to 10, 12, whatever, she just simply has a larger pool for that to happen amongst. Now, I'm not saying that, women are sexual, men are sexual, okay? But I think that the reason why women cannot form as healthy attachments because of being more promiscuous is because there's more potential for her to meet a more alpha lover than the guy that she's going to end up being with. So you get a woman who goes through her party years. She has 10 or 12, guys that she's had sex with. And then she gets to be 29, 31 years old. And now she has to settle down, and she's got to find somebody who's going to be a good long-term provider. And the guy that she's going to get with, the best provider, is not going to be anywhere near as exciting as the most alpha guy that she was with in her party years. And so, but she has to do it because she has to, settle down and have kids, because she wants to have kids, and this is a good provider. He might not be as exciting, but I'm going to get with him. She has maybe 1, 2 kids, 7 years. That's what I call the 7-year itch. Right around 7 years, she starts thinking, man, they start pining for those old days. They pine for the excitement that they had before. And you have this what we call the divorce porn industry, where women are sold this eat, pray, love narrative, where it's like, if you just divorced your husband, you could go back and relive all that stuff before you're too old to do it, right? So you're 37, girl. Don't worry about it. You can go back and get your groove back, right? And so what do they do? Like Eat, Pray, Love. Even I forget the Elizabeth something or other who wrote that. She'd gone through exactly that. She ditched her husband, decided to run off and get some more exciting lover, and that didn't work out for her. And now, of course, she finds herself completely abandoned and alone and all. But this is what, the outcome of her going back and living through that. So I think premarital sex is something that's going to happen, but I don't think that promiscuity necessarily has to happen for women.
I know you use that. There's a term you use that I chuckle at, which is riding the cock
Carousel. Yeah. I wish I could claim responsibility for that, but I did not. I call that the party years, really.
Yeah, and so there are these
guys,
phases where women are being different during different phases of their life. And
yes.
in your second book, you break down all of the different phases that men and women should be aware of so that we're conscious about how we're behaving with one another. You call it the schedule of mating. And what I'd like to do, Rollo, is to leave a cliffhanger here, because I'm sure we could have an entire show about the schedule of dating, because you have an entire book about it. And I think it's probably, for me, it's been one of the most eye-opening aspects of what you teach. So my brother, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your wisdom, sharing your enthusiasm about helping men, supporting men, working with men to become great again, bro.
For sure. Thanks for having me, though, man. This is great. I love meeting up with guys like you, and it's just, I don't know, it's always a positive. I like it when we get into more positive kind of things, because you can get cynical about this stuff. You can get because it's reality is sometimes not a positive thing, and you just have to sort of like I tell guys all the time, they want to go back to this blue pill thinking. They want to cling to their old ideals. You can't do that. Once you become red pill aware, there's no going back, and you can't get back into that. So people tend to think of it in like really nihilistic terms. They think it's very negative. So when you get into a situation where you're talking to a guy who's very positive about things, I always tell guys that the only reason that you are negative about this is because you don't see the potential that you have in a red pill paradigm. You don't see what you can build with all this new. I think it's exciting, really, to be honest.
Very exciting.
Great, because you now have the truth. And you can't say, hey, I was ignorant of this anymore. You have the truth in your hands, and you can now build from that, and you can make yourself a better person. And when people tell me that I help them save their lives, like I've got guys who will come up to me at the convention and say, I went to this convention just to tell you that you saved my life. I had planned to commit suicide, but I read your book and I realized what was going on, and then I saw the hope, the silver lining in all of this. And the guy was so much more positive than any guy that you would think of, just 4 months ago, who's going to kill themselves. And I'm like, it is very much a positive thing. And that's why I like talking.
So Rollo, the Rational Male, rationalmale.com. Thank you. And I'll talk to you next time, brother.
All right, let's do it again.